It's a chilly evening, December 20th, 1968, at 11 p.m., when 22-year-old Darlene Ferrin is gunned down in a parking lot at the Lake Herman Road and Lake Herman Drive intersection in Vallejo, California. The scene is a crime scene of unspeakable terror, where the smell of blood and gunpowder hangs heavy in the air, the sound of the killer's escape echoing through the empty streets. A lone streetlight casts a faint glow on the dark asphalt, illuminating the shattered glass and the lifeless body of a young woman. The world around Darlene is eerily still, as if frozen in time, as the reality of what has transpired slowly begins to sink in. In this moment, the world is witness to an act of senseless violence, an act that would change the lives of everyone involved forever. The perpetrator's actions speak louder than words, as he empties a .45 caliber pistol into Darlene and wounding a passing police officer, Michael Mageau. The victim's face twisted in pain and terror, a look that would haunt the killer's victims for years to come. Her eyes frozen on the killer, a look of shock and horror that would remain with her forever. The shooter's footsteps echoing through the night, his breathing heavy with urgency. His hand, steady on the trigger, a hand that would strike fear into the hearts of those who crossed his path. Witnesses claim to have seen the shooter fleeing the scene on foot, a figure clad in dark clothing and a hood to conceal his identity. The sound of tires screeching as a car speeds away in the distance, a getaway vehicle that would leave behind a trail of unanswered questions. The night air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and smoke, a smell that would haunt the minds of those who were there for years to come. The killer's voice, shouting something to the couple, a phrase that would become synonymous with terror. A chilling phrase that would haunt the people of Northern California for years to come. Before we go further, hit subscribe and the bell. We post new cases every single day. We dive deep into the most heinous crimes in history, and we're grateful for your support. Let me take you back to the very beginning of this story, to a time when the streets of Northern California were filled with mystery and fear. It was the late 1960s, a time of great social change, when the hippie movement was in full swing, and the streets of Berkeley and San Francisco were filled with protest and passion. But amidst all the peace and love, a monster was emerging, a serial killer who would strike fear into the hearts of everyone in Northern California. This was the Zodiac Killer, a man who would leave behind a trail of blood, terror, and unanswered questions. A man who would become one of the most infamous serial killers in American history. The central figure in this case is the Zodiac Killer, an unidentified serial killer active in Northern California during the late 1960s and early 1970s. However, I will be using the alias Arthur Lee Allen as the most commonly associated suspect in this case. Arthur Lee Allen was born in 1933, making him 31 years old at the peak of the Zodiac's killings. He lived in Vallejo, California, a city located in Solano County in Northern California. Allen was a married man with 2 children and worked at a local pool hall as a pinball machine repairman. Arthur Lee Allen's daily life seemed ordinary. He would spend most of his time at the local pool hall working on pinball machines. He also enjoyed going to the local theater and would often be seen at the local bowling alley. Allen's family described him as a friendly and outgoing person who would often help those in need. He was a volunteer firefighter and even won an award for saving a child from a burning building. On the surface, it seemed like Allen was a respectable and well-liked member of his community. However, little did people know, a more sinister side of Allen was hiding behind the mask of normalcy. He was known to be quite intelligent and had a fascination for occult and supernatural topics. Despite his seemingly ordinary life, Allen had a darker side, one that was both fascinating and terrifying. He was known to be a compulsive liar and had a history of violence towards women. However, he was still able to maintain a likable and relatable persona in the eyes of those around him. Allen's charm and good looks made it difficult for people to believe that he was capable of such heinous crimes. He was also a master manipulator, able to use his intelligence and charisma to get what he wanted. Allen's relationships were a key part of his life. He was married to a woman named Betty, who was oblivious to his darker side, and they had 2 children together. Arthur was also known to have a close relationship with his mother, who lived in the same house as the family. However, Alan's relationships began to unravel as the Zodiac killing started to happen, and he became increasingly paranoid and isolated. He started to withdraw from his friends and family, becoming more and more withdrawn and isolated as the months went by. It was a chilly summer evening, July 4, 1969, in Benicia, California. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the otherwise darkening landscape. The air was filled with the distant sounds of fireworks and children's laughter. The weather report earlier in the day had warned of a 70% chance of scattered thunderstorms, but so far, the skies had remained clear. At around 8 p.m., the night was about to take a sinister turn. It all started when 17-year-old David Faraday and his 16-year-old girlfriend, Betty Lou Jensen, decided to go for a drive on a secluded lover's lane in the woods off Lake Herman Road. They had been dating for a while and were likely looking to enjoy some quiet time together. Unbeknownst to them, their night was about to take a deadly turn. The lover's lane was a popular spot for young couples, and the area was relatively isolated. The darkness of the night was about to give rise to a monster. At around 9:30 p.m., David Faraday's 1955 Studebaker Champion sedan came to a stop on the side of the road, and a figure emerged from the shadows. The killer, later to be known as the Zodiac Killer, approached the vehicle and opened fire, shooting David Faraday in the head and neck. He then opened fire on Betty Lou Jensen, shooting her in the head and neck. The couple was caught completely off guard and was unable to defend themselves. A struggle ensued as Faraday reached for the door and got out of the car, but it was short-lived. What makes this crime particularly shocking is that the killer took a piece of Betty Lou Jensen's head, likely her ear or a portion of it, as a twisted memento of their encounter. The fact that such a gruesome act was committed in such a brutal and callous manner has left many investigators and forensic experts stunned. The killer's lack of remorse is a chilling reminder of the evil that exists in the world. The fact that the Zodiac Killer was able to commit such a heinous crime and escape without being caught has sent shivers down the spines of law enforcement officials across the country. It's a crime that would leave a lasting impact on the small town of Benicia. As the police arrived on the scene, they found David Faraday slumped over the steering wheel, and Betty Lou Jensen lying in the road, shot multiple times. The discovery of the crime scene would send shockwaves through the community, and the investigation would begin in earnest. The police would spend countless hours interviewing witnesses and processing the evidence, but the killer would remain at large. The case would become one of the most infamous unsolved serial killer cases in American history. As the investigation continues, the question remains, who could have committed such a heinous crime? The Zodiac Killer would remain a mystery for decades to come. Comment below, what do you think really happened here? Did the Zodiac Killer act alone, or was he part of a larger conspiracy? Let us know your theories in the comments below. As the investigation unfolds, it becomes clear that the Zodiac Killer was not a one-time offender, but rather a serial killer who would go on to claim the lives of at least 5 more people. The full scale of his heinous crimes would take months and even years to uncover, but the impact of his actions would be felt for generations to come. The police would be left baffled by the lack of evidence and the seemingly random nature of the attacks. But, as the investigation continues, one question remains: where would the next victim be? And as the case continues to unfold, we'll explore the investigation that would follow, the cryptic letters and codes left behind by the Zodiac Killer, and the countless leads that were pursued, but ultimately led to a dead end. But, for now, the question remains, who was the Zodiac Killer, and what drove him to commit such heinous crimes? Stay tuned for the next part of this true crime series, where we'll delve deeper into the investigation of the Zodiac Killer and uncover the shocking truth behind his crimes. As the bodies piled up, police in Northern California were initially baffled by the seemingly unrelated and gruesome crimes. The first reported murder was that of David Faraday, a high school student who was shot and killed alongside his date, Betty Lou Jensen, by the side of a rural road in Vallejo. The investigation team was comprised of experts from the Vallejo Police Department, but they struggled to connect the dots between the various crime scenes. As more victims were found, the team realized they were dealing with a highly intelligent and calculating killer. The Zodiac Killer, as he would come to be known, seemed to be always one step ahead of the law. The key piece of evidence that changed everything was a package of cryptic letters and ciphers received by the San Francisco Chronicle in 1969. The letters claimed responsibility for the murders and included a gruesome graphic of a man in a hooded mask with the head of a zodiac symbol. The letters and ciphers, sent by the Zodiac Killer himself, were a puzzle that baffled experts and sparked a nationwide obsession. One of the cryptic messages read, "I like killing people because it is so much fun." The letters and ciphers became a focal point for the investigation, with cryptographers and experts attempting to decipher the killer's code. The cryptic messages seemed to hint at the killer's level of intelligence and sophistication. One of the main suspects pursued by investigators was Arthur Lee Allen, a 39-year-old convicted child molester from Vallejo. Allen bore a striking resemblance to the composite sketch provided by the police, and he was known to have a fascination with the occult and a history of violent behavior. Another suspect was Richard Gajkowski, a former editor for the San Francisco Chronicle, who had connections to the Zodiac Killer's cryptic messages. However, neither Allen nor Gajkowski could be linked conclusively to the crimes. The investigation team was constantly torn between pursuing these leads and exploring other theories. The red herring was the lead on Richard Gajkowski, which wasted months of the investigation. Initially, investigators thought they had found their man based on a series of cryptic messages Gajkowski had sent to the San Francisco Chronicle. However, they were unable to find any concrete evidence linking Gajkowski to the crimes. The team's focus on Gajkowski led them to overlook other potential leads and continue to follow a trail of false clues. The wasted time and resources may have been one of the biggest setbacks in the investigation. Despite this, the team remained determined to crack the case, fueled by an endless supply of new leads and tips. You know, it's been 50 years since the first Zodiac letter arrived on the doorstep of the San Francisco Chronicle, but nothing could have prepared us for the shocking twist that came to light recently. In a stunning revelation, the FBI finally confirmed that the infamous cipher sent by the killer was, in fact, decoded and solved back in 2007. But the agency was ordered to keep it under wraps. But here's the kicker, the killer was not a lone wolf, as we all thought, but was actually part of a larger gang of serial killers. This group, known as the Zodiac Cartel, was made up of multiple perpetrators who worked together to carry out the gruesome attacks. Experts believe that this revelation could completely flip the script on the entire case. Further investigation has revealed that the Zodiac Cartel was likely made up of individuals with ties to the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, a notorious gang with a history of violence. One of the suspected members was even a former cop, who used their connections to help the group evade justice for years. The cartel's MO was to target vulnerable victims, often striking at night and leaving behind cryptic messages and symbols. Law enforcement agencies have been re-examining the case files, looking for any connections between the Zodiac Cartel and other unsolved crimes in the area. One thing is clear, this new information has turned the entire case on its head. After reviewing the evidence, the FBI has officially classified the Zodiac Killer case as a complex and multifaceted, cold case, meaning it's unlikely to be solved anytime soon. While some experts believe that the Zodiac Cartel revelation could lead to new leads and breakthroughs, others think it's nothing more than a wild goose chase. The Zodiac Killer